Well, are you ready to get into Yah's Word today? I am as well. I want to invite you to open your Bibles with me to Leviticus chapter 6. And we're going to begin with verse 1 in just a moment. And we are tracking along with the Torah portion for this week. And today we're going to be talking about restitution. Restitution is what a person does when he has sinned against his brother. He makes it right. He makes peace with his brother. So the question is, and this is the title of my message today, is restitution necessary for forgiveness from Yah? Again, restitution. Is it necessary for forgiveness? Let's get right into the text. It says in Leviticus chapter 6, beginning with verse 1, and Yah spoke to Moshe, saying, when any being sins, sin is the transgression of the Torah, and committed a trespass against Yah, so sin is trespassing against Yah, and has lied to his neighbor about a deposit, or about a pledge, or about a robbery, or shall extort from his neighbor, or has found what was lost, and has lied concerning it, or did swear falsely, so that he sins in regard to any one of all these that a man does. And so this is talking about sinning against your brother, offending your brother. And this passage tells us that a sin against your brother is a sin against Yah. It began with when any being sins and committed a trespass against Yah. And then it talks about offending your brother, sinning against your brother. So sinning against your brother is a sin against Yah. Let's pick up with verse 4. Then it shall be, when he sins and shall be guilty, that he shall return what he took by robbery, or what he has extorted, or the deposit which was deposited with him, or the lost item which he found, or all that about which he swore falsely. Notice, he shall repay its total value, add 1/5 more to it, and give it to whom it belongs on the day of his guilt offering. So when he's coming to offer to Yah a guilt offering for the forgiveness of his sin against his brother, it is necessary that he first makes right with his brother, makes peace with his brother. He has to bring 100% of what he stole or what he lied about he had in his possession. He said he didn't have it. He's got to bring 100% of it. That's a total return of what he took, and then add 1/5 more. So what is the 1/5 more? It's a peace offering toward his brother. Because if he just brought back what he took, that's a good start. But his brother could still be angry with him that he took it. But because he adds 1/5 to it, it's a peace offering. It's like an olive branch to his brother to make peace with his brother. And when he has done that, when he's followed this principle of restitution, he's come back, he's admitted that he sinned against his brother, he returned what he took, and he added 1/5, only then can he go and offer his sacrifice to Elohim to be forgiven. And so let's think of it this way. He brings back 100%, but he adds to it another 20%. So people say, yeah, I'm all in for making peace with my brother, 100%. No, you have to be in it for more than that. You have to be in it for 120%. That's like I'm all in, 120%. I'm doing everything that I can to make peace with my brother. Now, when we bring this into the new covenant, you're going to see it's there as well. And the idea is that when you sin against your brother, you need to be 120% in to making right what you had made wrong. You have to fix it. If you broke trust, you have to earn trust. If you took something, you have to restore it and add something to it. You have to be 120% in to making peace with your brother. It's not enough just to be 100%. You have to pay restitution. You have to make peace with your brother. Now, notice what it says here in verse 6. It says, then he brings his guilt offering to Yah, a ram, a perfect one from the flock, with your valuation as a guilt offering to the priest, and the priest shall make atonement for him before Yah, and he shall be forgiven for whatever he did that made him guilty. So only after this one who sinned against his brother makes right with his brother can he come and offer an offering for an atonement for his sin and be forgiven by Yah. There is no forgiveness from Yah without making right with your brother. That's a very important and powerful principle that we see all throughout Torah, all throughout Tanakh, and into the second writings. Now, just to make my point about how it's all throughout the Bible, let's go over to Matthew chapter 5, and we'll pick up with verse 23. Matthew chapter 5, beginning with verse 23. This is Yeshua speaking. Notice what he says here. If then you bring your gift to the slaughter place, and there remember that your brother holds whatever against you, leave your gift there before the slaughter place and go first make peace with your brother and then come and offer your gift. So if you've sinned against your brother and you're coming to make peace with Elohim because of your sin, to offer your gift, this is Yeshua saying, you remember when you're coming to offer your sacrifice to Yah that you hadn't made it right with your brother. Then leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and make it right with your brother, and then come and sacrifice your gift to Elohim. Because without making right with your brother, you receive no forgiveness from your father. And this is Yeshua speaking. And what is he teaching? He's teaching Leviticus chapter 6, what we just read, because Yeshua is the ultimate Torah teacher. If you didn't know that it was in the Torah, you would think that Yeshua was just teaching a very wise thing, that we need to make right with our brother before we can be right with Elohim. Yes, but that's in the Torah. So we see it right here that Yeshua is teaching the Torah. Now, let's go over to Exodus chapter 21, and we're going to see some more about restitution here. Exodus chapter 21, beginning with verse 18. Notice what it says here. And when men strive together, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die, but is confined to his bed, if he rises again and walks about outside with his staff, then he who struck him shall be innocent of blood. He only pays for lost time and sees to it that he is completely healed. And so because he hit him with a stone or with his fist and he suffered great injury, if he survives, he's not guilty of blood guilt, but he does have to pay for his lost time, and he sees to it that he is completely healed. That's restitution. You got to make it right. You got to be 120% in on making it right with your brother. Now let's go down to verse 22. And when men strive, and they shall smite a pregnant woman, and her children come out, they're born prematurely, yet there is no injury, he shall certainly be punished accordingly, as the woman's husband lays upon him, and he shall give through the judges. And so there is restitution to be made if you strike a pregnant woman, even if it's unintentional. You strike a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, you have to pay whatever the judges say you have to pay to make it right. But if there is injury, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, lash for lash. And so if there is injury, you can't change that. It is what it is. Then there's forced restitution. And the forced restitution is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, lash for lash. And so restitution is in the Torah, and Yah is all about restitution. He's all about brothers making it right between them, making peace with one another. It says, and when a man strikes the eye of his male or female servant and destroys it, he is to let him go free for the sake of his eye. So if he strikes a male or female servant and puts out his eye, then the restitution for that act is that you let that servant go free. And if he knocks out the tooth of his male or female servant, he is to let him go free for the sake of his tooth. Again, restitution, making it right. So if someone knocks out the tooth of their servant, then the restitution is you got to let him go free. And when an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall certainly be stoned, and its flesh is not eaten, and the owner of the ox is innocent. However, if the ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned, and he has not kept it confined, so that it has killed a man or a woman, the ox is stoned, and its owner also is put to death. And so the penalty for that negligence is death. It says, if a sin covering is laid upon him, in other words, if the family doesn't want him to die, but they put a sin covering on him. In other words, they say, this is the price that you have to pay to make it right with us. I'm talking about the family of the one who died at his hands, in essence. If a sin covering is laid upon him, then he shall give the ransom of his life, whatever is laid on him. So he has to pay restitution. He has to make it right. He has to make peace with the family. Whether it has gored a son or gored a daughter, according to this right ruling, it is done to him. If the ox gores a male or female servant, he is to give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox is stoned. Again, this is making it right. This is restitution. And when a man opens a pit, or if a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls in it, the owner of the pit is to repay. He is to give silver to their owner, and the dead beast is his. And when the ox of a man smites the ox of his neighbor, and it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the silver from it, and also divide the dead ox. Or if it was known that the ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has not kept it confined, he shall certainly repay ox for ox, while the dead beast is his. So again and again, we see it all throughout Torah, that if you offend your brother, if you sin against your brother, if you cause harm to your brother or to his property, then you must make it right. And when you make it right with your brother, then you can go offer your sacrifice to Yah to be forgiven of your sin. Now let's go over to Exodus 22 in verse 1. When a man steals an ox or a sheep and shall slaughter it or sell it, he repays 5 cattle for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. So if a man steals an ox or a sheep and he slaughters that ox or that sheep or sells the ox or the sheep, then he has to repay 5 cattle for 1 ox and 4 sheep for 1 sheep. That's restitution. He has to make it right with his brother. If the thief is found breaking in, implying breaking in at night, and he is struck so that he dies, there is no guilt for his bloodshed. So that's considered self-defense. If he's breaking into your home at night and you strike him and you kill him, then you're not guilty of bloodshed. It says, if the sun has risen on him, in other words, if it's during the daytime, there is guilt for his bloodshed. He shall certainly repay. So you don't kill him. If he's breaking into your home during the day, you cannot kill him. If you do, there is guilt for his bloodshed. But he must repay. If he has not the means, if he's not able to repay, then he shall be sold for his theft. So he's sold into servitude, and the money that's received from his sale goes to paying back what he owes for his theft. If the theft is indeed found alive in his hand, so if he still has the ox or the sheep or whatever he's stolen, whether it is an ox or donkey or sheep, he repays double. That's restitution. That's making it right. When a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed bare and lets loose his livestock, and it feeds in another man's field, he repays from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. So if he lets loose his animals and they go over and they graze bare another man's field or vineyard, then the man who let loose his animals, whether he intended to or not, he has to repay from the best of his field or the best of his vineyard. He's got to make it right. He's got to make peace with his brother. It says, when fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes. I don't know if you've ever burned thorn bushes. I have. There's some kind of oil in those thorn bushes that's really flammable. And it says here, when fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes, so that stacked grain or standing grain or the field is consumed, he who kindled the fire shall certainly repay. So if he kindles a fire, he's certainly not intending, I don't think, to burn his neighbor's field or standing grain or stacked grain. But it happens because the fire gets into the thorn bushes and it becomes highly flammable, and it burns his neighbor's stacked grain or standing grain. Then he has to repay for what has happened. When a man gives silver or goods to his neighbor to guard, and it is stolen out of the man's house, if the thief is found, he repays double. You see, over and over and over again, we see these instances of when a man offends or sins against his neighbor, that he must repay. It's not just, oh, I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? That's what we hear in mixed up religion. No, you have to make it right. Not only are you 100% in on making it right, you have to be 120% in. I mean, all in on making it right with your brother. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of Elohim. You have to be a peacemaker. You have to make it right. He goes on to say, if the thief is not found, then the master of the house shall be brought before Elohim to see whether he has put his hand into his neighbor's goods. Remember, his neighbor gave him something to keep while he was away. And if they don't find a thief, then they have to find out if the neighbor that he deposited those things with actually stole those things from him. For every matter of transgression, for ox, for donkey, for sheep, for garment, or for whatever is lost, which another claims to be his, let the matter of them both come before Elohim, and whomever Elohim declares wrong repays double to his neighbor. So to bring someone before Elohim is to bring someone before Elohim's appointed judges, and they declare whether a man is guilty or innocent. When a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or ox or sheep or any beast to watch over, and it dies or is injured or is driven away while no one is looking, let an oath of Yah be between them both, that he has not put his hand into his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept that, and he does not repay. But if it is indeed stolen from him, he repays to its owner. We see this over and over again. If it is torn to pieces, then let him bring it for evidence. He does not repay what was torn. And when a man borrows from his neighbor, and it is injured or dies while the owner of it is not present, he shall certainly repay. But if the owner was with it, he does not repay. If it was hired, he is entitled to the hire. I could go on and read you all of these passages. Again, the Torah is replete with examples of someone who has offended his brother or sinned against his brother, making it right, offering peace to his brother so that he can then get forgiveness from Elohim. Now let's go over to Numbers chapter 5, and we'll begin with verse 5. Numbers chapter 5, beginning with verse 5. It says here, and Yah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, when a man or woman commits any sin that men commit in trespass against Yah, and that being is guilty, then they shall confess their sin which they have done, and he shall restore his guilt in its principal plus 1/5 of it, and give it to whom he has been guilty. Again, this is reflecting back on the fact that a sin against your neighbor is a sin against Yah. And if you sin against your neighbor, you are to repay what you took, and you are to add to it 1/5. Again, 120%. We see it again here in the book of Numbers. Now, it says, but if the man has no redeemer to restore the guilt to, if there's no one to pay the 120% to, the guilt which is restored goes to Yah for the priest, in addition to the ram of the atonement with which atonement is made for him. So he can't make right. Maybe his neighbor passed and he can't make right with his neighbor, or a neighbor doesn't have family. So he comes and he gives the 120% to the priest on the day when he offers his sacrifice to receive forgiveness from Yah. This is so powerful. 2 Samuel chapter 12, beginning with verse 1. Notice what it says here. Then Yah sent Nathan to David. Nathan was David's prophet. And he came to him and said to him, there were two men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The rich one had flocks and herds, very many, but the poor one had only one little ewe lamb, which he had bought and kept alive, and it grew up with him and with his children together. It ate of his own food and drank from his own cup and lay in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. And a traveler came to the rich man, who refused to take from his own flock and from his own herd to prepare one for the wayfaring man who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. And the wrath of David, the sovereign David, burned greatly against the man. And he said to Nathan, as Yah lives, the man who has done this is a son of death. In other words, he deserves to die because he had no compassion. Also, he has to repay fourfold for the lamb. You know, we already read that if a man steals a sheep, he has to repay back 4 sheep for the 1 sheep. And sovereign David understood that from the Torah, so he's making that point. Also, he has to repay fourfold for the lamb, because he did this deed and because he had no compassion. And so sovereign David made a judgment. He made a judgment that the man deserved to die because he didn't have any compassion. But he also stood with the Torah and said, since this man took the poor man's lamb against his will, then he has to pay back fourfold. He has to give 4 sheep for that one sheep. And so he's just echoing the Torah. Now let's go over to Proverbs chapter 6. We'll pick up with verse 30. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 30, it says, they do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his appetite when he is starving. So that's a concept that you don't despise a thief if he's stealing because he's starving. He has to feed himself. Yet if he is caught, he repays 7-fold. So if he's caught, if this thief who's stealing to satisfy his own hunger, if he's caught, he has to still repay 7-fold. Again, that's part of the concept of restitution. If you sin against your brother, you have to make it right. Now, let's go over to Ezekiel chapter 33, and we'll pick up with verse 14. It says, again, when I say to the wrong, you shall certainly die. You shall die because of your disobedience to the Torah. If he turns from his sin and does right and righteousness. What does that mean? Well, he sinned. He sinned against his brother. And so he's going to do right and righteousness. He's going to perform restitution. He's going to pay back, and he's going to offer a peace offering. He's going to make peace with his brother. So in light of that, let's read it again. Again, when I say to the wrong or to the sinner, you shall certainly die. If he turns from his sin and does right and righteousness, if the wrong restores the pledge, again, he's talking about sinning against your brother, gives back what he has stolen, and walks in the laws of life. In other words, he performs restitution as the Torah tells him to do, without doing crookedness, he shall certainly live. He shall not die. None of his sins which he has committed shall be remembered against him. He has done right and righteousness. He shall certainly live. And so performing restitution, making it right with your brother, is right and righteousness in the eyes of Elohim. And we see it even in the second writing. So we're going to go over to Luke chapter 19 and pick up with verse 1. Luke chapter 19, beginning with verse 1. Notice what it says here. And having entered, he was passing through Jericho. This is speaking of Yeshua. And see a man called Zakkai. And he was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. And he was seeking to see who Yeshua was, but was unable because of the crowd, for he was small in stature. And having run ahead, he climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, because he was about to pass by. And as Yeshua came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said to him, Zakkai, hurry and come down, for I have to stay at your house today. And he hurried and came down and received him rejoicing. And seeing it, they all grumbled, saying, he has gone in to stay with a man who is a sinner. They were complaining about Yeshua going into Zakkai's house. But Zakkai stood up and said to the master, look, master, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have taken whatever from anyone by false accusation, I repay fourfold. And so this is Zakkai in the presence of Yeshua stating to him, look, I want to be right. I want to be right with Elohim. So what I'm going to do is give half of my possessions to the poor. I'm going to commit this righteous act in the eyes of Yah by giving to the poor. but also if I've taken whatever from anyone by false accusation, if I've sinned against my brother, if I've stolen from them, if I've lied about them and taken more money from them than I should, notice, I repay fourfold. You know, Yeshua didn't step in and say, oh, hey, that's just Old Testament. You know, that's all been abolished. Under me, you don't have to consider any of that stuff. No. Yeshua is representing the Torah of Elohim. Deuteronomy 18 and 19 says that Yah has placed his Torah in Yeshua's mouth, in the prophet like Moshe's mouth. And Yeshua is proclaiming all that Yah has commanded him. And if there's anyone who will not obey the Torah, the word of Yah that's coming out of Yeshua's mouth, Yah will judge him. And so Zakkai understood that Yeshua was representing the word of Yah. And so it was natural for him to say, if I've stolen anything by falsely accusing them, I will repay fourfold. And notice how Yeshua responded to that. And Yeshua said to him, today deliverance has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the son of Adam, speaking of himself, has come to seek and to save what was lost. And so he's saying, because he obeyed the Torah, because he obeyed the word of Elohim, then deliverance came to his house. So he was going to perform a righteous act by giving half of his possessions to the poor, but he was also going to pay back to those he had stolen from fourfold. And that's in accordance to the Torah commandments. And so Yeshua saw that and said, that's right living. And so deliverance has come to your house today. Now, let's go back over to Matthew 5 and pick up with verse 17. We were in Matthew 5 earlier, but let's revisit that. Matthew chapter 5, picking up with verse 17. This is Yeshua speaking. Do not think that I came to destroy the Torah of the prophets. That's why restitution is still in effect today under the new covenant. Because Yeshua is saying, I didn't come to do away with the Torah commandments. I didn't come to destroy or abolish the Torah or the prophets who were representatives of Yah, who were shaliachs, representatives of Yah and his word. I did not come to destroy, but to complete, or to bring to its deepest spiritual application. I'm going to live it out before you so you'll know how to obey the Father in spirit and in truth. For truly I say to you, till the heaven and the earth pass away. Well, let me ask you this. Has the heaven or the earth passed away? Well, the answer to that is no. Yeshua is saying, for truly I say to you, till the heaven and the earth pass away, one yod, the yod is the smallest of the Hebrew letters, or one tittle, those are the little decorative strokes on the letters, shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. In other words, not one yod and not one tittle, not one command is going to pass from the Torah until the heaven and the earth pass away. So when the heaven and the earth pass away, then there's a new heaven and there's a new earth and a new Jerusalem. And in that period, then those who are with Elohim in the new heaven and the new earth and the new Jerusalem, they are the righteous ones. They have an exalted human body that doesn't have sin nature dwelling in their members. And so they're not tempted. They're not tempted by the lust of the flesh. That's all been done away with. That's all been dealt with. So there's no need for a commandment not to murder or to commit adultery, because we don't have those temptations in that period. So what does this say to us? Well, let me read it again. For truly I say to you, till the heaven and the earth pass away, one yod, or 1 tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done, until that time when it's not necessary for the Torah, when we have a new heaven and a new earth and a new Jerusalem, and Yah is dwelling in the midst of his people. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands. Which commands is he talking about? He's talking about the Torah commands. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the reign of the heavens. Well, remember when we were talking about restitution? That was a commandment. The commandment was, if you sin against your brother, you have to make it right. You have to make peace with your brother by restoring what you took from him and adding to it. That's part of the Torah commandment concerning brothers. So if you're living against that, and then you're teaching men to break the commands, including the commandment about making peace with your brother, then you'll be least in the reign of the heavens. But whoever obeys the commandments and teaches them, in other words, you obey the commandments and you teach others to obey the commandments, the Torah commandments, which would include making peace with your brother when you've sinned against him, that person who obeys and teaches others to obey shall be called great in the reign of the heavens. He goes on to say, for I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens. And their sin was the sin of hypocrisy, where they said one thing, they taught the commandments, but then they didn't obey them. That's hypocrisy. He goes on to say, you heard that it was said of those of old, you shall not murder. So he's quoting Exodus 20, verse 13, and Deuteronomy 5, verse 17. And whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. You're going to face the judgment of Elohim if you murder, if you take someone's life. But I say to you that whoever is wroth or angry with his brother without a cause. What does that mean, without a cause? Anyone who is angry with his brother without a cause shall be liable to judgment. Those same words are used for the person who is angry with his brother without a cause. Let me read it again about murder. You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. And then it goes on to say, if you're angry with your brother without a cause, you have no cause to be angry with your brother, shall be liable to judgment. It's the same phrase, and it's the same punishment. So what does it mean to be angry with your brother without a cause? In other words, when your brother sins against you, you're angry. You're angry because he's offended you. He's sinned against you. He's stolen from you. He's broken your peace. He's broken trust with you, whatever it might be. You're angry with him. But how is it that you would be angry without a cause? You're angry without a cause. In other words, you don't have a right to be angry with him. How is it that you don't have a right to be angry with him? Because he's performed restitution. He's actually obeyed the Torah. When he broke the commandment and he sinned against you, he then was convicted. He confessed his sin to you, and he came and he performed restitution. He gave you back what he took, and he added 1/5 to it. And at that point, he's performed restitution. Now, once he's made right with you, then he could take his offering to Elohim and make peace with Elohim and receive forgiveness. But if you're someone who is still angry with someone who offended you, even after he made right by you, he made peace with you, at that point, you're supposed to forgive him. And if you are unwilling to forgive the one that Yah has forgiven, then you are in a very, very bad place. You won't forgive the one Yah has forgiven. He has obeyed the commandments. Yes, he broke the commandment when he sinned against you, but he was convicted. He confessed what he did. He made right by you, and you're still angry. You're angry with him without a cause. It says the person who's angry with his brother without a cause shall be liable to judgment. In other words, you are guilty of the same crime as the one who murders. Why? Because you are refusing to respect what this person has done to make it right. And you are bringing shame upon him. You are rejecting his own self-dignity. In essence, you are canceling him. It's like you've murdered him. So if you are angry in your heart, even though your brother has come and performed restitution, he's brought a peace offering to you. He wants to make right. He's 120% in making peace with you, but you're still angry with him and you won't forgive him. You won't forgive the one that Elohim has forgiven. Then you are liable to judgment. You are guilty of murdering your brother because you want to cancel him. You don't want to show him what's necessary for him to have self-respect. You're canceling his dignity. And that is a grave sin. But I say to you that whoever is wroth with his brother without a cause, you don't have a right to be angry with him. He's performed restitution. He's made it right with you, shall be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Zakkai, that means empty head or stupid one, basically, silly one who doesn't have much sense, shall be liable to the Sanhedrin. That's the authority of man. But whoever says, you fool, in other words, I'm not going to forgive you, even if you perform restitution, shall be liable to the fire of Gehinnom. That's serious. So what is this saying to us? When a person sins against us, I'm reading out of the second writings. This is New Covenant. When a person sins against us and comes and wants to make right, he wants to make peace. He wants to do whatever it takes to be at peace with you. But you refuse to forgive him, then in essence, you're murdering him. You're murdering him. And so we are required by Torah and by all of Scripture to forgive those who repent, who perform teshuvah, who turn to the Master in obedience, who want to make up, who want to make peace, and who perform restitution. We are required to forgive them. All right, let's continue. If then you bring your gift to the slaughter place and there remember that your brother holds whatever against you, leave your gift there before the slaughter place and go. First make peace with your brother and then come offer your gift. We talked about that earlier. It's very important. Let's continue. Be well-minded with your opponent. Your opponent is that person you're at odds with. Promptly. Be well-minded with your opponent promptly while you are on the way with him, lest your opponent deliver you to the judge and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Truly I say to you, you shall by no means get out of there till you have paid the last quadrans. And so you're either going to pay restitution willfully and willingly, or you're going to pay it through some other means. Forced restitution. In other words, Yah is going to seek vengeance upon you. All right, let's go to Matthew chapter 6, and we'll pick up with verse 12. Matthew chapter 6, beginning with verse 12. This is Yeshua teaching his Talmudim, his taught ones, about how to pray. And notice what he says here. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. In other words, when someone sins against us and they come to perform restitution and they make peace, they attempt to make peace, and we are unwilling to forgive them, Yeshua is saying, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. If we're unwilling to forgive them when they're following the Torah to make right with us, then Yah's not going to forgive us our debts, no matter what we do to try to make peace with him. Look at verse 14. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father shall also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither shall your Father forgive your trespasses. In light of what we just talked about, when that person who has offended us, who has sinned against us, is convicted, confesses his sin, returns what he's taken from us, even if it's not monetary, if it's our peace, or if it's now we have a lack of trust because of something that person's done. They restore that trust and they add 20% to it, right? It applies across the board. However, your brother has offended you, when he makes up with you by coming and seeking peace with you, you must forgive him, because if you don't forgive him, you will not be forgiven by your heavenly Father. That's a fact. When that person reaches out to you to make right, he confesses his sin that he committed against you. He returns to you what he's taken, and he adds to it a peace offering, in essence. He's wanting to make peace, and you don't forgive him. Yeshua said you won't be forgiven by your Father. When you do forgive him, then you will be forgiven by your Father. Let's go over to Matthew chapter 18 and pick up with verse 15. Matthew chapter 18, picking up with verse 15, it says, and if your brother sins against you, that's what we've been talking about this whole time, go and convict him. In other words, go to him and tell him how he has offended you, how he has broken the Torah concerning you, how he has sinned against you. It says, between you and him alone. If he hears you, what does that mean? He understands that he has sinned against you. And when he comes to that understanding, he confesses that he sinned against you. And he follows the Torah in making restitution towards you. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Then all is well. You have peace between you. But if he does not hear, that means he's not willing to confess that he sinned against you. He's certainly not willing to perform restitution. He's not willing to restore anything back to you or to add anything to it. It says, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word might be established. That's Deuteronomy 19:15. So take 1 or 2 more people with you next time. And these are witnesses to what took place. And these witnesses also speak to him, and they show clearly how he has committed a sin against his brother. Now, if he's convicted and he confesses his sin and he performs restitution, then peace is made. Then he can go and he can make peace with the Father. But it says, and if he refuses to hear them, so he's still pushing back here, say it to the assembly. So then you take it to the assembly. And the entire assembly then witnesses that this man is resisting what the Torah is saying about performing restitution. And if he refuses even to hear the assembly, notice, let him be to you like the nations and a tax collector. So the nations are Torahless. And this man is acting like he's Torahless, like he doesn't know what the Torah says that he should do. He's refusing to obey. So you treat him like the nations and a tax collector. A tax collector was considered a traitor because the tax collector was Jewish, but he was collecting taxes from the Jews to pay the Romans. And so that was very much looked down upon. And so the whole concept of restitution is still in the second writings because these are Jewish people and they understand the Torah. You don't have to repeat everything. When you were raised in it, you understand it. And so they're not repeating it over and over again just because it's in the second writings. They understand what restitution is. And if a person will not hear how he has committed a sin against his brother and will not perform restitution, then ultimately he is to be considered someone who resists the Torah, someone who's like the Torahless nations and a tax collector who in essence is a traitor against his own people and against the living Torah of Elohim. All right, let's look at verse 21. It says, then Kephah came to him and said, Master, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Again, Shimon Kephah is a Jew. He understands that when his brother sins against him, he is to perform restitution. He's to make it right. He's to follow the Torah in making peace with his brother. So all of that is baked into the cake, so to speak. It's just considered a normal understanding. Again, then Kephah came to him, speaking of Yeshua, and said, Master, how often shall my brother sin against me, implying performing restitution, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? You think about this like, okay, so a man sins against you. He's convicted. He confesses his sin. He brings restitution. He's making peace. Peace is made. You forgive him. He goes. He makes right with the Father. All is well. But then it happens again. Maybe it's some other sin. And he comes again to the same person and he confesses his sin and he makes it right and they have peace. Then he goes to the Father and makes right with the Father. All is well. But then it happens again and it happens again and it happens again. And that's what Shimon Kephah is talking about. He's saying, is there a limit? At some point, do I say, hey, man, you have sinned against me over and over and over again. I know you've made restitution each time. You've brought that peace offering and I've forgiven you. But at what point, Kephah is saying to Yeshua, at what point do I say, that's enough? Enough is enough. I'm not going to forgive you. What does Yeshua say? It says, Yeshua said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. 70 times 7 is 490 times. That's not what he's talking about. That once you get to 491, you don't forgive him anymore. That number is used as a means of telling us that you always forgive your brother, no matter how many times he sins against you. When he performs restitution, as the Torah says, you must forgive him, because if you do not forgive him, then you are not forgiving one whom Yah has forgiven. As soon as that man confesses his sin and brings restitution, then he's forgiven by Yah. What are you going to do? Are you going to not forgive the man that Yah has forgiven? If you don't forgive him, then Yah considers you murdering that man, because you've robbed him of his own self-dignity. In essence, you've canceled him. He's not even a human being to you anymore. So you have murdered him. And so there is no limit to how many times a person can sin against you, perform restitution, offer peace, make peace, and then you don't forgive him. There's no limit to the number of times you forgive him and then you stop. You have to forgive him. That's the point Yeshua is making here. Let's look at Luke chapter 17, and we'll pick up with verse 3. Luke chapter 17. Picking up with verse 3. And this is really going to make it clear what I'm talking about here. Luke chapter 17, beginning with verse 3. Take heed to yourself. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him. In other words, tell him what he's done against you. It may be that he'll be convicted and confess his sin against you and perform restitution. Notice, and if he repents, that word repents implies restitution, because that was the only way that one who sinned against his brother could be forgiven by Yah, is to perform restitution, to make it right, to be a peacemaker. Again, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of Elohim. If he repents, then forgive him. Release his debt. Make peace with him. That's what that's saying. Make peace with him. Act like nothing ever happened. And if he sins against you 7 times in a day, in one day, and 7 times in a day, comes back to you saying, I repent, I was wrong, I perform what the Torah commands me to perform to make right and to make peace with you, restitution, you shall forgive him. And that backs up what we've been saying, that it is required of a believer to forgive a person who confesses his sin against you and performs restitution, whatever it might be. If he's all in on making peace with you, 120%, you must forgive him. Now, what do we do with people who do not perform restitution? They don't confess their sins. They don't try to make peace with you. What do we do with those people? Well, it tells us what to do over in Romans chapter 12, beginning with verse 14. Romans chapter 12, starting with verse 14. How do we act toward the person who doesn't confess his sin against us? How do we act toward the person who continues possibly in his sin toward us? How do we act toward the person who's not trying to make peace with us? The person who's not performing restitution? Well, it says it right here in verse 14 and following. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. All right, you have to be bigger than the person who's persecuting you. So if they're persecuting you, that's in the present tense. They're persecuting you. They're not performing teshuvah. They're not repenting. They're not confessing their sins. They're not performing restitution. What do you do with that person? Well, they're persecuting you. So the scripture tells us we are to bless them. That's how we're bigger than them, in essence, if you understand what I mean by that. You can't get down in the ditch with them. You can't go low with them. You have to go high. Bless those who persecute you. Let me read it again. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Now, that's a commandment for us. That's how we act to those people who are actively sinning against us and who do not perform restitution. We bless them and we don't curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. In other words, unify yourself with the people, with your brother, with your sister, in whatever he's going through, rejoicing or weeping. Be of the same mind toward one another. In other words, have unity. Do not be proud in mind, but go along with the lowly. Don't think too highly of yourself. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Don't exalt yourself above other people. Notice, repay no evil for evil. What does that mean? Don't get in the ditch with them. If they are persecuting, if they're doing evil against you, don't do evil in return. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. Well, what is right is what the Torah says to do. Respect that. Always do that. If possible, on your part, be at peace with all men. So let's say that you sinned against your brother and you were convicted and you confessed your sin to your brother and you brought restitution and you brought a peace offering and you are making peace with your brother. Well, at that point, you've done everything you can do. Your brother could still be wroth in his heart without a cause against you. But that's not on you, that's on your brother. You do what you could do. That's what this is saying. If possible, on your part, be at peace with all men. That's what we're to do. Always be peacemakers. It goes on to say, beloved, do not revenge yourselves, but give place to the wrath. For it has been written, vengeance is mine, I shall repay, says Yah. In other words, what do we do with people who sin against us, who do evil things against us, who speak evilly against us, who persecute us? We turn them over to Yah. It's not that we have to remove their debt. In other words, forgive them for what they're doing. But we turn them over to Yah because Yah is going to take care of it. We don't seek vengeance. We turn that over to Yah. It says, vengeance is mine. I shall repay, says Yah. Instead, this is what you do. The people who do not confess their sins against you and who do not participate in restitution. It says, instead, if your enemy hungers, this is not talking about a nation that's attacking your nation in a war setting. This is talking about your brother who's acting like an enemy, someone who is doing evilly toward you. Instead, if your enemy hungers, feed him. Feed him. If he thirsts, give him drink. For in so doing, you shall heap coals of fire on his head. That's not the intention. That's not your goal, is to heap coals of fire on his head. It just means when he's treating you evilly, if you treat him well, if he's hungry, you give him food. If he's thirsty, you give him drink. Then your righteous actions toward him might convict him. He might see what he's done wrong to you. He might confess his sin. He might perform restitution. He might reach out a hand of peace to you and make peace with you. It's the way you act toward him that either will cause him to dig in his evil toward you, or to be tenderized in his heart toward you and say, you're right, I have sinned against you and I want to make peace with you. It says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, I just have a few more verses, 2 to be exact. Ephesians 4:31. Ephesians 4:31, we're going to look and continue along this course of what we do when people sin against us. What are we charged to do? What are we commanded to do? Ephesians 4, beginning with verse 31. It says, let all bitterness and wrath and displeasure and uproar and slander be put away from you, along with all evil. Even if they're doing evil against you, then don't respond with more evil. And be kind towards one another, tenderhearted, notice, forgiving one another, implying that they're doing the right things. If they sinned against you, then they're coming to make peace with you. Forgive them, forgive one another, as Elohim also forgave you in Messiah. And then Colossians 3, beginning with verse 12, it says, therefore, as chosen ones of Elohim, set apart and beloved, you're set apart to Elohim, so you walk in the ways of Elohim, you do what Elohim commands, set apart and beloved, put on compassion, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, patience, bearing with one another, notice, and forgiving each other if anyone has a complaint against another. Indeed, as Messiah forgave you, so also should you. In other words, when a person commits a sin against you, if they are convicted in their hearts and they come to you with restitution, offering peace, doing whatever is necessary, 120% to make peace with you, they want peace with you. When they've done that, they're forgiven by Elohim. Now, what are you going to do? Are you not going to forgive the one Elohim has forgiven? Yes, he sinned against you, but his sin against you was a sin against Elohim, and Elohim has forgiven him because he's done the right thing. Now, what are you going to do? If you don't forgive him, you've murdered him. You have canceled him. Biblical cancel culture, we see it right there. We see a lot of that today. You have robbed him of self-dignity and self-respect. And you've made him like not even a person. In essence, you've murdered him. Well, you'll be judged for that. No, what does the word tell us to do? We should be kind. We should be tenderhearted. We should forgive those who come to us wanting peace with us, just as Yah has forgiven us, as we have believed upon Yeshua and submitted to water immersion. Then our sins are forgiven, and we receive an empowerment then to be able to love Yah the way he wants to be loved through obedience to his commandments, which would include bringing restitution to the ones we have sinned against. So yes, the answer to the question that we asked at the very beginning, is restitution necessary for forgiveness? The answer is yes.